Making roads with obsidian. Experimental approaches to obsidian chain operatoires in northwestern Argentina during the formative period. Obsidian in northwestern Argentina can be found in the volcanic areas in the highlands, also known as the Puna area. Several sources were used since the earliest human occupations of the region. The bulk of obsidian came from two major sources, marked by red circles on the map, which had long-term stable distribution spheres with limited geographical overlap. During the first centuries AD, part of the formative period, circa 1500 BC and AD 500, the dominant source in the southern sector of northwestern Argentina was Ona Las Cuevas, which was used for a variety of tools. Other sources like Laguna Cavi and Cueros de Purusha had more limited distribution ranges and may have been primarily destined to projectile points. The formative period sites under study in the Cajon Valley, with dates ranging between 1958 and 1781 BP, have mainly two kinds of points, long and narrow with outline stems, and small triangular points with more defined stems. They are all largely made of opaque obsidian. The longer points have a characteristic thick section indicating absence of thinning. The triangular points are not markedly thin either. Overall, the triangular points tend to be wider than the longer ones, although some specimens approximate in their maximum widths. Also, while most of the triangular points have well-defined stems, some of them appear to have stems that are closer in shape to those of the longer points, with tapering sides converging to the distal end. The opaque obsidian assemblages have very few thick flakes that could be used potentially as blanks for some of the points, yet none of these had the necessary length for the longer points. No coarse or cortical flakes of opaque obsidian were found at either of the sites, and the percentage of cortical flakes is very slow, especially for opaque obsidian. The very low percentage of cortical flakes and absence of suitable blanks for longer points in opaque obsidian, as well as the absence of cores, led to the hypothesis that the initial reduction shaping of the longer points took place outside of the sites. The presence of some formal similarities and occasionally close metrics raised the question of whether at least some of the triangular points could have resulted from different pathways within a shared reduction sequence with the longer points, or whether they were the result of entirely different sequences. We assume the first option to be highly unlikely, but it was worth exploring through experimentation. The archaeological materials that this study focused on were recovered during ongoing work in the area by the Pascal team, Proyecto Arqueológico Sur Valles Calchaquíes, led by Professor Cristina Scatolin from the Instituto de las Culturas from CONICET and University of Buenos Aires, and also from University of La Plata. This slide shows a selection of obsidian preforms and points from the site Cardonal in the Cajon Valley. Most of the points were made using one of the two varieties of opaque obsidian, with only one made with the translucent variety that came from the major source Ona. It is possible to see here the two general types of points, elongated ones and smaller triangular ones. So the aims of the study were to find the chain operatoire for each of the two different styles of points found, determine whether there were shared stages in their sequence, and determine the size of cores needed to make the flake blanks for these points. The photographs show two obsidian cores of the gray-banded translucent variety found in the Cajon Valley. The one on the right was recovered at the site of Cardonal. It is an Ona obsidian core, and the one on the left was donated to the research team by a local community member. This core, which appears to be of Ona obsidian as well, does not have a securely dated context, and it is unclear whether it is from a formative period or from a later occupation. These cores gave us a reference to what might be available in the region, although they were from a different kind of obsidian to the one used for most of the points. It was not possible to source opaque obsidian, therefore we used an obsidian type that had more glassy characteristics closer to the Ona type. Professor Bruce Bradley provided the raw material and reduced two large cores into 5 small cores. All the bitage made during the reproduction process was kept and recorded. The main processes carried out were production of small bifacial preforms on flakes using direct percussion, some of these shaped into long narrow points by pressure flaking. Smaller flakes were struck and shaped by pressure flaking into triangular points, and some of these triangular points further work into smaller points to test whether that could have been possible at all. All of the flakes tracks were measured and weighed before and after they are retouched into projectile points. During the shaping process, care was taken not to shape them too invasively, so as not to thin the flakes, as the majority of the archaeological examples still had traces of the original dorsal and ventral surfaces. The preforms were made using direct percussion with a small sandstone hammerstone. All other working was done with a bone pressure flaker. The preform or flake blank was held flat on the napper's left thigh and pressure was applied. This technique was used to prevent flakes from running too far and was suggested by Professor Bradley. A key factor in the replication of these points was that given that the originals were not thin, the thickness of flake blanks to be used were as close to the artifactual evidence as possible. The images show the bone tool used for pressure flaking and the obsidian cores prepared by Bruce Bradley. The results gave us a wide range of artifacts to consider. 34 flake blanks were made, 12 from core 1A, 13 from core 2A, and 10 from core 3A. From these flake blanks, 8 triangular points were made, and 13 bifacial preforms were made. From these preforms, 5 long points were obtained. With the exception of one of the long points, all of the points have thicknesses matching those seen archaeologically. However, many of the experimental points are somewhat larger in other respects. From the methodology followed here, it is possible to suggest that the larger bifacial pieces described as preforms could have been used as blanks for making the long points. It could also be suggested that the preforms with a slight tang are actually more representative of point blanks, in that this facilitates the manufacture of a tang by pressure flaking. The methodology also suggested that it's highly unlikely that any of these would have been used as blanks for some of the triangular points. Thinning was clearly not pursued for longer points, while the triangular points appear to have been made from originally thinner blanks. These aspects suggest a clearly different chaîne opératoire for each style of point. However, there are aspects of these that we would like to investigate further, as there are still questions around why some specimens have closer metrics than we normally would expect. The size of core used to make these points would have not been large. The cores used in these experiments did not exceed 120 millimeters in length, but it was found that anything smaller than 50 millimeters was no longer workable for the purposes of making points. This suggests that the smaller core found shown in slide 3 may have had at least one point left in it. We also did another trial a few years later with a different and very experienced napper. The results confirmed the results of the first attempt, but also this experiment drew our attention to the distinctive C-scars creating a notch that helped define the root of the stem. This was proposed as a distinctive, if not uncommon, finishing touch, and also drew attention to the distinctive C flakes in the debitage that otherwise had not been noticed. It is also interesting that both nappers found it difficult having to stop thinning the specimens in order to stay close to the archaeological samples. The quantitative analysis of these results is underway to assess size profiles of experimental assemblage, as well as other metric and non-metric characteristics of the flanks and debitage obtained at the points, so that we can compare these with the artifactual assemblages and make inferences about the activities that took place at these sites. But besides this, the study was extremely useful to help us think what is missing from archaeological obsidian assemblages, and what aspects of these absences might be due to usage and napping context, and what to the actual stage in which the raw materials enter the sites. Another aspect in which the study was very useful was on the issue of expertise and skill transmission. If longer stem points were not thinned further at the sites, was this due to a lack of expertise or to a cultural choice of what made a suitably good point? Another question that came up was whether different people were involved in making each type of points, or whether these differences related to different hunting techniques or target species. When we think about different people, we mean different community members of the same sites. And we're not talking about cultural markers, but necessarily about variety and diversity of nappers in these societies. At the broader scale, the study also allowed us to rethink the issue of material biographies and itineraries. How can we tell the story of obsidian movements across the landscape? How many different material biographies, in the sense of shared narratives of the sequences and stages in the life histories of places, materials, and people, were enacted through acquisition and napping practice, and to what extent this varied across different kinds of obsidian? These are questions open for future work, and I'll be happy to discuss more in the questions and answer session. Thank you.